Good day. If you are wondering, is it worth buying the third generation BMW X5 F15 2013 to 2018 and what problems you may encounter during operation, then you are at the right place. The new BMW X5 is a dream. Very few can afford a prestigious and very expensive crossover of a premium German brand. Saves the secondary, where there are enough both frankly tired copies of the first generation at minimum prices and third generation crossovers that still have not lost their relevance. Stylish appearance, excellent dynamics, comfort, power units for every taste. The BMW X5 has plenty of strengths. But, asking the price of a used copy, it is worth remembering that every metal has two sides. Demanding quality and frequency of maintenance, high operating costs, expensive spare parts. This side of the metal, when buying, as a rule, they try not to remember. Often in vain. Why has the BMW X5 proved so popular? Perhaps this is the case when many individual factors, merging together, gave an excellent result. In 1999, when the first generation BMW X5 saw the light, no one could have imagined that a rather large crossover could be driven like a passenger car. The fact that in the early 2000s there was a rapid growth in the class of crossovers also played a role. Motorists all over the world gladly changed from the usual sedans and station wagons to the roads raised above the ground. The boom in crossovers turned out to be so great that many buyers simply did not pay attention to some of the shortcomings of the first generation BMW X5, a rather cramped interior, stiff suspension. Surprisingly, even a manual transmission was available for the first generation BMW X5. Identified shortcomings were brilliantly corrected in the second generation BMW X5, which debuted in 2006. The novelty has grown significantly in size, which allowed the creators to offer a third row of seats as an option. However, only small children could sit in the gallery, so the 7-seater BMW X5 was not in great demand. Far more potential buyers were interested not in additional seats, but in the latest electronic systems. By and large, in terms of equipment, the second generation of the BMW X5 was in no way inferior to the flagship sedan of the 7th series. If desired and available, the crossover could be equipped with active steering, electronically controlled dampers, and the adaptive drive system that had just appeared at that time. In 2010, the second generation of the crossover was slightly updated. Changes in appearance and technical component were insignificant. The designers have slightly changed the shape of the grille and optics, and the engineers have worked on the impact and improved the efficiency of the existing line of power units. In 2013, the third generation BMW X5 was introduced, which was produced for 5 years. It is noteworthy that by this time the German company had localized the assembly of crossovers in Kaliningrad. Naturally, the most popular modifications with all-wheel drive, an 8-speed automatic and 3-liter petrol and diesel turbocharged 6s were chosen for the Russian assembly. Interestingly, a crossover with a 2-liter engine was also presented in other markets. However, the Germans rightly decided that a premium car with a 4-cylinder power unit will not be in demand among our motorists. The most powerful modifications to the Russian market were supplied from the American BMW plant. It was there closer to the main sales market that the main production was deployed. From making a car body entirely of steel, BMW refused a long time ago. Not surprisingly, the body of the BMW X5 is a kind of puzzle. The hood is made of aluminum, the front fenders are made of plastic, and other elements are made of high-strength steel. Many motorists do not even know how fundamentally different materials are attached to each other. You have to deal with technological refinements if the car gets into an accident. It turns out that simple welding in the case of the BMW X5 is not enough. The engineers of the German company used both bolted connections and special high-strength glue and connecting parts with rivets. It is impossible to reproduce similar operations in a garage service. Of course, craftsmen will almost always find a way out of this situation, but the cost of restoring a German crossover even after a small accident can be stunning. As for the corrosion resistance of the body, it is at a very high level. BMW is not accustomed to saving either on the quality of the materials used for the manufacture of the body or on the quality of the paintwork. In addition, plastic fenders or an aluminum hood cannot, by definition, rust. You should be more careful only with those BMW X5 that were brought to us from across the ocean. It has been noticed that those crossovers that were operated near the seacoast begin to rust faster in the bottom area due to sea salt. Fortunately, such specimens are very rare in our secondary market. Rather, the appearance of the German crossover will be spoiled by decorative chrome moldings, which become covered with a dark coating in a couple of years and then completely begin to peel off. The problem has been known for a long time and does not bypass even those owners who carefully monitor the cleanliness of the car. To the credit of the German company, it is worth saying that peeling chrome moldings were often changed under warranty. Another thing is that after 2 to 3 years the situation repeated itself, but this time it was no longer possible to count on a free replacement due to the end of the warranty period. Interestingly, the company's instructions suggest using a special paste, which supposedly should protect chrome from external influences. In fact, domestic reagents turn out to be so caustic that the protective composition gives in to them. The emergence of obvious problems is only postponed for a fairly short period of time. The weak point of the German crossover is the door handles. Their design was frankly unsuccessful, which is why they often break off. I would like much more durability from door closers. Cases when their incorrect operation led to the opening of doors while the car was moving, although rare, are still known. Fortunately, after the closers open the door one position, an unpleasant draft begins to enter the cabin, after which it is no longer possible not to notice the obvious problem. Naturally, the German manufacturer promptly solved the problem, but it is possible that a small part of the cars already sold did not reach official BMW dealers to eliminate the defect. When driving at speeds above 140 to 150 km/h, wind noise and a small draft can also enter the passenger compartment due to improperly adjusted doors. You should not put up with this drawback, since you can even adjust the door latch yourself. The interior of the third-generation BMW X5 makes a very pleasant impression: well-balanced ergonomics, solid finishing materials, inimitable style. Over the years, the impression deteriorates only a little, especially if the previous owners did not turn a blind eye to emerging age-related problems. For example, with a run of 150,000 kilometers, interior plastic may begin to creak and rattle a little in the area of /U200B/U200B trunk lid. The situation is easy to fix. To do this, it is enough to adjust the trunk lid and replace the rear door latches. Another thing is if the same center console or door cards were disassembled for some reason and then assembled without observing the necessary technology. In this case, there may be more extraneous sounds. Against the background of a very good overall sound insulation, they will be heard very well. The skin of the skin is different. When buying a BMW X5, this is important to understand, since the German company used different types of leather to trim the seats. Some varieties resisted natural wear a little better, others a little worse. But a lot depended on the owner. Leather, like any other natural material, periodically requires care and treatment with a special conditioner. If the owner did not neglect the care, then even with a run of 200,000 kilometers, the leather upholstery of the seats will be in quite good condition. Of course, by a run of 80 to 100,000 kilometers, small creases and cracks will appear on it, but practice shows that with proper skin care, they remain barely noticeable. By the way, in addition to the standard seats for the BMW X5, the so-called sports and comfort seats were offered, which differ from the standard ones in a large number of adjustments. If the car will be operated in typical urban conditions, then it makes little sense to overpay for stylish sports seats. All their advantages are revealed only with a very active ride. Sitting behind the wheel, you should definitely check the performance of the driver's seat settings control unit. Sometimes there are problems with it. As a rule, the unit fails if the car is used by several drivers at once, who daily adjust the seat for themselves. The rest of the numerous electrical equipment of the BMW X5 also requires a thorough check. A potential buyer can independently check the functioning of keyless entry and parking cameras. The latter sometimes fail. Over the years, unpleasant surprises are also possible from the steering column with electronic adjustment. When checking the operation of the steering wheel adjustment, you should also listen for squeaks and other noises coming from the steering wheel. They should not be even when the steering wheel is turned. Otherwise, it is likely that you will soon have to fork out to replace the steering column. By the way, sellers who are aware of the problem almost always assure that it will be possible to get rid of squeaks with the help of inexpensive lubricant. In reality, this turns out to be far from the case. Defeating creaking front seats is much easier. Extraneous sounds disappear after gluing the fasteners and joints with a special fabric electrical tape. Power tailgate, radio, satellite navigation, all these gadgets should also be checked when inspecting the car. The iDrive system, which was often buggy in early versions of the crossover, requires special attention. Fortunately, it usually does not reach more serious problems. After a reboot or software update, iDrive starts working properly again. In addition to checking the electrics, it is worth spending time inspecting the panoramic roof, which was installed on the BMW X5 as an option. In no case should it let water into the cabin. To do this, the future owner should make it a rule to periodically clean the drain hoses from accumulated debris. Otherwise, moisture will sooner or later find its way into the car interior, which can result not only in stains on the upholstery, but also in damaged electronic components. It does not hurt to periodically clean the dirt from the area located under the windshield. In addition, dried leaves and debris actively accumulate in the area where the hood hinges are located. The diesel line of power units was represented by the following versions: 25D, 2 liters, 218 horsepower, 25D, 2 liters, 231 horsepower, 30D, 3 liters, 258 horsepower, 40D, 3 liters, 313 horsepower, and M50D, 3 liters, 381 horsepower. The general rule for all diesel engines is the use of high-quality fuel. Another common point is that all diesel BMW X5s, regardless of the volume and power of the engine, were bought in order to drive quite a lot. As a result, the use of diesel crossovers is usually noticeably greater than that of modifications with gasoline engines. The main weak point of 2-liter diesel engines is the rapidly stretching timing chain. In no case should you rely on the official figures of its resource. In real operating conditions, the chain stretches already to a run of 100,000 kilometers. Next, only replacement. The operation is not cheap, since replacing the chain is impossible without removing the power unit. Despite the desire to save money, it is highly not recommended to delay the replacement, since everything can end with an open circuit and the subsequent restoration of the power unit. The service life of the crankshaft damper on a diesel engine is limited to a mileage of 100,000 kilometers. Another weak point is the swirl flaps, which are gradually covered with a layer of soot. Some masters approach this problem radically. The dampers are removed, and special plugs are installed instead. At the same time, the EGR valve is turned off, after which another program is poured into the electronic engine control unit. It is extremely important to protect the 2-liter diesel engine from overheating. If the temperature regime of operation is not observed, cracks form between the cylinders. In order to brew them, you will need at least 50 to 60,000 rubles. But since such repairs are rather short-lived, usually after the defect is eliminated, the car is immediately put up for sale. If you buy a new unit, then you will have to pay at least 40 to 45,000 rubles for it. Another 50 to 60,000 rubles will have to be spent on major repairs. If, however, all service intervals are observed and the power unit is not loaded, then a 2-liter diesel engine, regardless of the degree of forcing, can serve at least 300,000 kilometers until overhaul. The resource of the turbine in the same conditions is also very high, about 200,000 kilometers. Problems with swirl flaps are also characteristic of a 3-liter diesel engine. They also gradually coke from soot. To prevent this from happening, you will have to periodically clean the EGR valve. Or, as in the case of a 2-liter engine, completely get rid of the dampers and reflash the power unit. It is noteworthy that on a 3-liter engine, the timing chain lasts much longer. Replacing the timing chain will be required only after a run of 200,000 kilometers. The turbine also withstands the same 200,000 kilometers. Moreover, the masters are able to replace the turbine without dismantling the motor, due to which the repair is relatively inexpensive. The crankshaft damper on a 3-liter engine lasts about 100,000 kilometers. As for the resource of a 3-liter diesel engine, it is estimated at 300 to 350,000 kilometers. But the quality of fuel will have to be monitored even more closely. The fact is that the Bosch fuel pump turned out to be very sensitive to the sulfur content in the fuel. In the event of a breakdown, the pump begins to clog the fuel system with tiny metal particles. Ultimately, this leads to the need to replace the injection pump and injectors. There are cases when expensive repairs were required already with a run of 40 to 50,000 kilometers. Although in most cases the fuel system, even in our conditions, can withstand at least 160 to 180,000 kilometers. A crossover with a 2-liter gasoline engine, if one is found in the secondary market, does not make sense to buy, not only because of the 4 cylinders and relatively low power, but also for reasons related to the specifics of operation. Quite quickly, due to dirty nozzles, the 2-liter unit starts to work with increased vibrations. In addition, rapid contamination is characteristic of the idle valve and throttle valve. A sure sign that they require cleaning are floating turns. The weak point on the 2-liter engine is the airflow meter. The increased fuel consumption will tell you that it is faulty. From the point of view of dynamics, the 3-liter gasoline engine, version 35i, 306 horsepower, is ideal for the BMW X5. Unfortunately, you have to pay for the pleasure with oil consumption. You will have to check its level regularly. Interestingly, official BMW dealers do not see anything wrong with an oil appetite of 300 to 350 grams per 1,000 kilometers and consider this the norm. If the oil consumption is even higher, then you should pay attention to the condition of the valve stem seals. If, after replacing them, the oil appetite does not fall, then you will have to fork out to replace the piston rings. In addition, a faulty EGR valve can contribute to oil loss. Saving on the quality of the oil is highly discouraged. Otherwise, you will have to deal with coking of hydraulic lifters, the replacement of which will cost 6,000 to 7,000 rubles. You should also be prepared for the fact that the nozzles will require replacement every 100,000 kilometers. In the event of a malfunction, the engine will start to work with increased vibration. However, worn-out supports of the power unit can also become the cause of unpleasant vibrations. Unpleasant surprises should be expected from high-pressure fuel pumps. Its resource on a 3-liter gasoline unit rarely exceeds 100,000 kilometers. Ignition coils also have an insufficiently large resource. The 4.4-liter petrol engine has even higher oil consumption on average. Especially oil appetite increases in the case of coking of the piston grooves, due to which the rings cease to fully perform their work. In our conditions, this happens every 50 to 60,000 kilometers. It is noteworthy that the moment of oil change in the BMW X5 is determined by smart electronics. Often, it allows you to drive up to 20,000 kilometers without changing the oil. Naturally, this does not affect the health of the power unit in the best way. Neat owners, contrary to the prompts of electronics, prefer to carry out an oil service every 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers. An important nuance: if a car with old-style piezo injectors for some reason stood motionless for a long time and did not start, there is a possibility of a water hammer. For those BMW X5s that have the latest injectors installed, this problem is no longer relevant. Another typical problem with a 4.4-liter engine is coking of the lines that supply oil to the turbines. The latter in this case often fail. Misfires also deserve some attention. In them, as a rule, the candles requiring replacement are to blame. Practice has shown that it is better to use candles recommended for the BMW X5M version of the crossover. Other things being equal, they last longer. As for the resource of the engine itself, with proper maintenance, it can serve at least 200 to 250,000 kilometers. All versions of the crossover were equipped with an 8-speed automatic transmission. Owners of the most powerful versions of the BMW X5 should once and for all understand one thing: a large heavy crossover, despite its excellent dynamic performance, is by no means a sports car. In other words, the automatic transmission is not designed for frequent abrupt starts, aggressive driving, and even more so for slipping and slipping. Such modes significantly reduce the resource of not only the machine itself, but also the transfer case. The automatic transmission is even worse in the case of engine chip tuning. The already considerable power becomes even higher, after which the box has to work at the limit of its capabilities. A typical problem with the BMW X5 automatic transmission is the failure of the electrohydraulic unit. Depending on the driving style of the owner, it can withstand from 50 to 100,000 kilometers. With active driving to the mark of 100,000 kilometers, the clutch package will also have to be replaced. The cost of the latter is from 90,000 rubles. However, any repair of a complex 8-speed gearbox is very expensive. But in general, the automatic from ZF is considered quite successful, especially if every 80,000 kilometers you update the oil and filter in it. The technical feature of the machine is that the oil filter in it is assembled with a plastic crankcase. Accordingly, after dismantling the filter, the crankcase also needs to be updated, which is why oil service is not cheap and costs at least 30 to 35,000 rubles. But if you do not skimp and drive carefully, then an automatic transmission from ZF may well last 350 to 400,000 rubles. Suspension is the strength of the BMW X5. Even with active driving on our not-so-ideal roads, most of its consumables last a commendably long time. In the front suspension, the anthers of the front CV joints will most often remind of themselves. In the rear suspension, wishbones and ball joints are considered relatively weak points. The resource of ball bearings of the upper arm ranges from 40 to 60,000 kilometers. Stabilization struts also have approximately the same service life. Steering tips withstand longer, from 70 to 90,000 kilometers. After a run of 100 to 120,000 kilometers, the time will come to replace the hub bearings. Usually, by the same run, the upper supports and shock absorbers practically exhaust their resources. If the mechanical component of the suspension is quite reliable, then owners encounter surprises from suspension sensors much more often. Usually the sensors begin to fail with the onset of cold weather. Fortunately, glitches do not affect the behavior of the car in any way and usually disappear after a restart. On the new BMW X5, active steering gave no reason to criticize itself. Another thing is that it is impossible to discount possible age-related problems, the elimination of which will require a lot of money. There should not be any extraneous sounds when turning the steering wheel. If there are any, then you will have to deal with the replacement of the ring, which is located on the steering column. When evaluating a used BMW X5, it is important to soberly assess your financial capabilities. Buying a premium German crossover is only half the battle. It is very important that the future owner could support him. Moreover, in this case we are talking not only about the planned replacement of technical fluids and brake pads. Many used crossovers have already managed to cross the threshold of 150 to 200,000 kilometers, which means that serious investments in the power unit, suspension, and gearbox are just around the corner. Get off the sum of 30 to 40,000 rubles will not work with all the desire. With an unfortunate combination of circumstances, the account can go to hundreds of thousands of rubles. It is hardly advisable to specifically look for an instance with the maximum set of options. Less details, less problems. But even if the diagnostics show that everything is in perfect order with the car, this does not mean at all that after 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers some minor problem will not arise. The choice of power unit is an individual matter. With proper maintenance, all power units are ready to serve at least 200 to 250,000 kilometers. Another thing is that you can hardly expect that the hot version of the X-Drive 50i was driven slowly and carefully. Accordingly, the most powerful motors had to work at the limit much more often. As a result, the best option is a crossover with a diesel engine under the hood. The main thing is to make sure that the actual mileage numbers appear on the odometer. The minimum price tag for a BMW X5 in the F15 body in the secondary market is 1.9 to 2 million rubles. But it is not necessary to hope that cheap copies will be spared from problems. The most expensive BMW X5 are estimated at 4.7 to 4.8 million rubles. In this case, we are talking about fresh cars manufactured in 2018 with a mileage of up to 50,000 kilometers. If you are the owner, then be sure to leave a comment about this car. Your review will definitely help others with the choice of a car.